If you like this video, please give a thumbs up and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to be notified of new videos. Perhaps because 1954 was such an incredible year for UFO activity with literally thousands of accounts and reports, it is no surprise that some incidents almost slip through the net of our attention. That is very much the case with the bizarre and intriguing encounter of Armando Zabaran, who would find himself in the middle of a close encounter while driving to a business meeting near Acapulco in Mexico in January 1954. Not only would the unsuspecting businessman find himself on board an apparent spacecraft from another world, but he would also embark on a journey into the far reaches of the cosmos. All the while interacting and soaking in information from the seemingly friendly occupants who had collected him from his car at the lonely Mexican roadside. Perhaps what also makes this account intriguing, and quite possibly credible, are some of the details that are not given by the witness. For example, unlike many who claimed to have had close encounters during the early 1950s who would state the strange visitors were from Venus or Mars, Zabaran didn't mention the name of the planet or if it was even in our solar system, only that these cosmic travelers hailed from elsewhere in the universe. The encounter comes to us from the UFO humanoid translations of Albert Rosales, and can also be found in the files of Scott Corrales. It further features in the book UFOs, Exopolitics and the New World Order by Ed Komarek. It is one of an absolute abundance of humanoid encounters, not only during 1954 but throughout the rest of the decade. A sudden, hypnotic state of lethargy, on the winding roads of Mexico City and Acapulco. Although the exact date is uncertain, at around 2 a.m. in the early hours of a January morning in 1954, Armando Zabaran was driving along between Mexico City and Acapulco. He was on his way to meet a business partner and he hoped to be there before dawn. The winding roads, however, would make his journey that bit longer. It was as he was negotiating these winding roads, his car headlights cutting through the night that rushed to greet his windscreen, he suddenly began to feel intense tiredness. In fact, more than tired, Zabaran began to feel in a hypnotic state of lethargy. He would ultimately pull his car to the side of the road to gather his thoughts a moment. When he did so, however, he noticed a strange scene awaiting him. In front of him was a strange object in the middle of the road. He would later describe it as brilliantly lit. Furthermore, around this object were several strange men. Each wore the same style of overalls with an extremely wide belt around their waists. They appeared to all be long-haired. He continued to watch the scene for several more seconds. Then, something truly strange happened. In what seemed like a flash, he was out of his vehicle and walking toward the strange craft. What's more, the strange men were escorting him to the glowing object. As he neared it, a slight buzzing became audible to him. He then entered the otherworldly craft. Not the first, nor the last. Upon entering the craft, he asked why they had chosen him for the honor of such a momentous meeting. The response was both fascinating and at least slightly potentially ominous at the same time when he was told that, "You are neither the first nor the last Earthman to be chosen for testing. Our task, slow though it may seem, is designed to persuade. We choose the likeliest, most malleable persons for contact so that they might better transmit our messages." What messages were being passed on to the rest of humanity by these persuaded individuals? And how slow did slow really mean in this instance? Might it suggest that the alien presence on our planet has been here for a lot longer than the last half a century or so since the Roswell crash, which, unofficial though it might be, hailed the beginning of the modern UFO era? As if to prove their superiority, he was shown a review of the smallest details of his life on a screen inside the ship. Then, one of the strange men took him around the craft. He would answer any questions he might have as he walked around. It was then that he was informed that the ship which he was on was no longer on the ground. In fact, it was no longer on the planet. He was instead traveling through space. Traversing space using a gravity repulsion system. Some of the details offered by Zabaran regarding the spacecraft and more specifically the propulsion methods that it employed are remarkably similar to details that would surface in the late 80s and early 90s from such people as Bob Lazar. The spacecraft's propulsion, for example, used a gravity repulsion system to travel from one heavenly body to another. This sounds very similar to how some researchers and whistleblowers state the propulsion systems of recovered alien vehicles in the hands of the United States government work. Although Zabaran didn't go into intricate detail, he would offer that his alien hosts would scan space ahead of them, and then dispel any objects in their path. Despite his fascination and eagerness, his hosts declined to take him to visit their home planet. They would, though, state that perhaps in the future, at the right time, such a journey could go ahead. He did, however, spend several days, for him, on board the craft. He would sleep and eat with the crew, and even use the equivalent of a shower on the ship, which he would describe as being covered in warm air, which then grew stronger, and transformed into damp air. This would then impregnate the skin. Zabaran then received liquid soap, which he would apply to his body. The intense rush of air then returned, evaporating the soap, leaving his skin dry and clean. Further signs of credibility. Apparent information about their diets also contains hints of a possible credible account. And what's more, it is perhaps the details left out that suggest this. For example, we have mentioned previously how many such close contact encounters just happen to match the personal beliefs of the witness, with diet being just one. However, according to Zabaran, these spacefaring aliens had a diet, while different in the specifics, that was very similar to ours. It would consist of vegetables, starches, and grilled meats. Fruit and fruit juices, apparently similar tasking to mangoes, also featured heavily in their diet. This could be a particularly interesting detail and reminds us of an account given by UK UFO researcher, Timothy Good. The incident also occurred in the South American continent and featured reports of an alien facility in the area. But more specifically of interest to us here, of a report from another apparent contactee who would claim that these alien visitors had a particular interest in the fruits that grew on Earth. They were, he would claim, crucial to their own diets, and how they could mix them with their own to create a new strain. Perhaps another intriguing, if bizarre detail, is the assertion that the provision of the crew would arrive with the ship, via telepathy. While this sends preposterous a notion, we should perhaps remind ourselves of the ancient Egyptian lessons of Ptah, who would imagine the world into reality. Many who subscribe to the ancient astronaut theory wonder if this legend describes some type of technology. Even more so when we consider the claims of covert intelligence experiments. Ones revolving around the imagining items into physical form. Or perhaps we should consider the cases in modern quantum physics of particles not existing, until someone physically observes them. Intriguing ties to government experiments and ancient legends. Another aspect that would contain a potentially important piece of information regarding the authenticity of the account is the information about the extraterrestrials' society and beliefs. One detail that surfaces are that they enjoyed a utopia of sorts. One due to the master, or more interestingly the beloved number 9. And an ideology of collaboration over competition in their society for 3,000 years. The mentioning of a beloved number 9 is particularly interesting, and could have a connection to the alleged Project Penguin. According to the conspiracy, this project group would channel non-physical beings, under the work of Dr. Henry Puharich. They would, if the claims are true, make contact with an entity that referred to itself as the 9. This entity was an eternal presence that watched over mankind. Even more intriguing, especially when we remember the links to the ancient Egyptian deity, Ptah, mentioned above, is that this entity would eventually claim to also use the name Atum, who just happens to be one of the 9 creator gods from the beginnings of ancient Egypt. Perhaps also worth mentioning is that these sessions began in 1952. Only 2 years before the abduction of Zabaran. and indeed the 1954 UFO wave that would sweep across the planet over the 12 months following it. Might these cosmic channeling sessions have some part to play in the wave of 1954? As well as those that followed it into the early 1970s. A second encounter outside Mexico City 15 years later, bizarrely, when Zabaran was returned to his car at the roadside where he pulled over upon feeling unwell just before seeing the strange entities. He was amazed to find that no time at all had passed, despite it appearing to be several days away. Even more bizarre, unsure what to do, he would continue on his journey to his business meeting. However, when he arrived, he would find that his journey had only taken him 90 minutes instead of several hours. Interestingly, according to the report from the early 1990s of the incident, Zabaran would pull over to the roadside just outside Mexico City one evening in 1969. He did so to give a lift to a hitchhiker. To his amazement, the hitchhiker would reveal himself to be one of the crew members from the ship during his encounter. We don't know, however, the content of the discussion, or what the purpose of this apparent second meeting was. Nor do we know if Zabaran did indeed receive the message these alien visitors were attempting to pass over to him, or if he passed on these teachings to others, whether discreetly or overtly. If there is an alien presence, how influential is it? The encounter of Armando Zabaran is just one of a distinct increase in UFO occupant and humanoid encounters around the planet in 1954. If, as they allegedly informed Zabaran, they were targeting specific people with the purpose of them being receptive to and spreading their message, what would be the reason for this? There are several interesting things to explore here. Not least whether these humanoid entities are the same many would witness around the planet over the subsequent 12 months. Or whether there was another race of aliens also making contact with unsuspecting people around the world with their own very different agenda in mind. Once more, the legends of good versus bad, and angels versus demons, come to mind. As do apparent sudden callings to spread the word, whether in our contemporary age or throughout history. Where do these notions really come from? Are they from the collective minds of humanity? Or might their roots stretch back not only into the faint reaches of antiquity, but also across the vast reaches of space? As we have asked before, if there is an alien presence with us on planet Earth, how long has such a presence been here? And just how influential is such a presence over the affairs and history of humanity? And above all else, why? Why should an apparent civilization from elsewhere in the universe wish to influence another civilization in such a way in the first place? Check out the video below. It looks at some of the strangest cases of UFO incidents in Mexico.